Jack,
Yes.
like to talk about the POW experience?
Well, first of all, I'd
Perhaps
just
not.
like to introduce Jim Carr, who was a prisoner of war with me in Stalag 4B in Germany. As Jim, now he was a young man, he was 19 years of age when he was shot down, and he went back to Germany recently and he picked up parts of his aircraft in the farm that where he was shot down, just to let you know. Thanks, Jim. I was very fortunate. When we were shot down, we were taken by ambulance to a little place called Antlat in the bottom of the Gulf of Sirte and were operated on by a German doctor who happened to be a Harley Street abdominal surgeon. After the First World War, part of the reparations, he decided to go to England to find a better life. Married an English girl, had 2 kids, and we used to go back to Germany doing consultations, and in August 1939 I went back and they wouldn't let him out. And he said to me, he said, Jack, he said, all I can do is do the best I can. He said, I've removed part of your intestines, patched you up, but unfortunately, being wounded, you'll be passed over to the Italians. We only take fit men. And I travelled for 4 days on an open truck with 3 other members of our crew, and he gave me 8 phials of morphine, which he said, jab yourself in the leg in the morning and at night time, and I don't remember anything about that trip, and thank goodness I don't. I arrived at Tripoli and were attended to by an Italian nurse, a lovely lady, she's in the late 60s I would imagine, and I hadn't eaten for 10 days, all I've been fed, intravenously fed. And she brought a bowl of pasta for me to eat, and I couldn't eat it. And she then went out and stewed a quince and put a lot of sugar in it, and that's the reason I'm here today. That decided me to eat. Now, as far as prison camp goes, I was in hospital for 4.5 months recovering from these wounds, which, that's fine. And I went to a camp in northern Italy called PG 57, Group Gnano, just near Trieste. It was an army camp, well run by the Australian New Zealand Army. It was fantastic, but the only trouble was that the rations were very poor, and unfortunately the commander of the camp was a part of the military police, and it decided that he would only give us 1 parcel, a Red Cross parcel a week to 6 men. Sometimes we didn't get any, but we survived. And when I got into Germany, where Jim was near a little place called Mühlberg, which is sort of the apex of Berlin, Leipzig and Dresden, there were 32 acres, 35,000 prisoners, including 24,000 Russians. The rest were all from all around the world. Now those Russian boys, they got 1 loaf of bread to 7 men for a week. We got 2 loaves of bread a week for about between 1 to 3 and 1 to 4. We got some parcels, and similarly there, because the Gestapo was in charge of the camp, although he wasn't the commandant, we suffered the same fate there, but we managed to buy, with cigarettes to the ration, we could buy coal, we bought wood alcohol to lace the non-alcoholic beer. We did everything we possibly could to make the buggers work harder to keep us there. And Jim can well countenance with this that it wasn't pleasant. But we banded together, and I can assure you that our friendship with each other is as close, if not closer, than our own families.
At the end of the war, the Russians came along.
Well, my period of POW was 3 years, 3 weeks, and 3 months and 3 weeks, as Chris said. Now, the end of the war came for us. Actually, we were recaptured by the Russians on the 24th of April 1945. We weren't released, we were recaptured. Our basis of food was we could walk past the Russian sacks of oats or barley or whatever they had, and you could put your hand in and that was your ration for the day. That didn't suit us at all, because we're used to having some sort of food, even from the Germans. We did have a little bit of bread, but the Russians, you must look at it this way, that the Russians were treated the Germans exactly as the Germans had treated them, and it was unfortunate, but 60,000 Russians died in our camp alone. Now that's incredible. But the food was enough to subsist on. And as Jimmy will vouch for this, the Red Cross parcel saved our lives. There's undoubtedly no doubt about that whatsoever. Otherwise we'd have been like the Jap boys, we'd have been starving to death. Thanks. Anything?
And the Russians themselves,
The Russians themselves. Now, I befriended a colonel in the Russian army. He went to Sandhurst in England and officer training, and he used to watch us play cricket. We had a cricket pitch made up, and Australia versus New Zealand, England, the whole bit went on. And he used to sit and watch us, and he'd say, "You know, Jack, we'll never get back home." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We've seen too much. We've seen how the other half live." He said, "Well, none of us will get home," and they didn't get home. The BBC put out many years ago, and they traced only 7 out of our camp ever got back to Moscow. Terrible.